Hello, Internet. It's Logan Albright here, back with another book review for your viewing pleasure. And today I want to talk about the novel We the Living by Ayn Rand. Ayn Rand was a polarizing and very controversial novelist. A lot of people really like her, a lot of people really hate her. And some of the criticisms leveled against her are that her characters are one dimensional, her dialogue is wooden, her scenarios are unrealistic and exaggerated or hyperbolic. Some of these criticisms are legitimate, some of them I would quibble with. I think she's a pretty entertaining writer for the most part. Among her more well-known works, I think Atlas Shrugged is a really good read, great book. I think Anthem, which is her second novel, it stands alongside major dystopias like 1984 and Fahrenheit 451 as a great example of that genre. I'm not as crazy about The Fountainhead, but that's my personal opinion. But We the Living was her first novel, and I think it's really important as a way of understanding where she's coming from and giving context to the rest of her work. We the Living is semi-autobiographical. It takes place in the Soviet Union in the 1920s, which is where Ayn Rand grew up. And it's the story of a girl named Kira and her trying to live her life and be with the man she loves and just survive under a totalitarian government. It's a lot more naturalistic and has a lot more realism than her later works, which tend to dip into science fiction in some of those areas. This is really a pretty bleak and stark portrayal of Russia in the 1920s. As her earliest work, it really kind of wears its influences on its sleeve. Ayn Rand's favorite author of all time was Victor Hugo, who also happens to be my favorite author of all time, so we share that in common. But this really reads a lot like a Victor Hugo book in places. There's a lot of the similar devices used and a lot of similar characterizations. I think the characters in general are a little bit more complex than in her later works, and that kind of owes something to Victor Hugo and Les Miserables and those sort of characterizations. You really get that kind of feel for the tone of the book. Ayn Rand was also a romantic, which means that she tends to like to draw bright lines between good and evil, right and wrong, which, you know, in the early 20th century when she was writing was a little bit out of vogue. People liked a lot more naturalistic type of writing, a lot more subtle, more a take on morality, a lot more gray areas. She liked black and white notions of truth and falsehood, which is the romantic tendency, and there's nothing wrong with that in literature. I happen to prefer it, but a lot of people criticize her for that. What I think is most interesting about We the Living is the context it gives to the rest of her work. This is the life that she led until she came to America in the late 1920s. It's shocking even to a student of history who may know something about the earliest Soviet Union. This idea that the individual had no importance. It was completely subjugated to the collective, to the party, to the state. Your life didn't matter except for insofar as you're able to serve the greater good. And just the horrific conditions which that led to, the awful poverty, the cruelty, the just callous indifference to human life, and the total injustice of it. Kira in the book is the daughter of a former factory owner, and as such is considered one of the bourgeoisie. So even though all of her property is seized and she's just as poor as everybody else, she's treated with horrendous prejudice because people regard her as, you know, not one of the workers. They regard her as an aristocrat. So she's unable to get rations of food, she's unable to get a job, she's unable to get any kind of medical treatment. It's this idea that the government just decides what everybody gets and doles it out based on how good of a citizen they regard you as being, instead of everyone, you know, working and earning their own living. So she really has a hard time because of her parentage. So you get to see in very real terms this kind of shocking, grinding, awful, repressive system where people are just crushed under the heel of the state and they have no way of getting out, they have no way of improving their situation, they have no way of being better. You also see the corruption of the members of the party who, even the ones who mean well, the idealistic ones, they end up having to use their position to give favoritism to their friends and their family, even though you're not supposed to do that. There's a lot of corruption that goes on. So the people at the top of the party, even though everyone's supposed to be equal in this egalitarian society, the people at the top have it a lot better off than the people who are just ordinary workers, because, you know, if you have power, you can use that influence to get good things for you and your family. So Ayn Rand grew up in this totalitarian system and saw how it just crushed the soul of the individual and said, you don't matter as a person. So I think it's understandable why she would have reacted against that and gone into this radically individualist frame of mind that she went in her later books. And I think that it's much easier to understand where she's coming from in her later books if you've read this and you know kind of what life she led before she came to America. It doesn't seem like so much of a caricature anymore. It doesn't seem like such an exaggeration. It seems like her real very well-founded fears of what might happen if the rest of the world goes the same way as the Soviet Union and embraces collectivism rather than individualism. So as a novel, I thought We the Living was pretty good. I enjoyed it. It's not my favorite of hers. I like Atlas Shrugged better. I like Anthem better. But it has some of her more well-developed, more well-rounded characters, and it's certainly useful in understanding the rest of her body of work and where it's coming from, and gives you a lot more insight into her personality and the history of her life that she led when she was writing this kind of fiction. So if you're at all interested in the ideas of Ayn Rand, or indeed just the fiction of Ayn Rand, you can certainly enjoy it without being a philosophical convert. This is a great place to start, and I do think she got better as a writer after this, but it's a great place to begin your journey into the world of Ayn Rand. If you don't want to tackle the 1,000-page tome of Atlas Shrugged right away, not a bad place to begin. So there you have it. That's Ayn Rand's first novel, We the Living. I think it's well worth a read. I'd love for you to reply in the comments to give your own opinions on the works of Ayn Rand or ask any questions. I'd be happy to respond. As always, feel free to subscribe to my channel if you want to see more of these types of videos, and click the like button and the notification bell to find out when I post new videos. I'll catch you next time. I've been Logan Albright. Thanks very much for watching.